gathering here this evening. I am delighted to welcome you to a shiur given from Efrat, from Rabbi Dr. Ashi Taragin. And I say Rabbi Doctor because you can see he's wearing his green scrubs at the moment. He's had a long day saving lives in the Holy Land, and now he is returning to his other passion, which is saving souls. Rabbi Taragin on emerging from lockdown.
Thank you, Rabbi Lawrence. Can everyone hear me, by the way? Can you hear me well from here?
All good.
Okay. Let's say there. So I see that we have currently 10 people, and halachically, once you have 10 people, there's a Shechina. Hashem is also with us, so we're good. It's actually interesting. Every time you look at the number 10 in Tanakh, the common denominator is that every time Hashem is galui, reveals himself, you always find the number 10. It's not related to the shir, I'm just saying it because we're 10 people. So Aseret HaDibros, Aseret HaMakos, Aseret HaSfirot. And that's why halachically, when you have 10 people, you also have Hashem's Shechina. Okay. So let's start. So the topic is emerging from lockdown. I felt like it'd be a very relevant topic, especially since we see that in Pesach, Am Yisrael in Egypt kind of went through the same thing that we all went through throughout the quarantine and throughout Corona. Now it's interesting. Does anyone know what is the Hebrew word for a virus? So it's a hard question. What is a virus called in Hebrew? So if you would ask a random Israeli on the street, he would tell you it's a virus. But no, what is a virus in Hebrew? A virus is just the same thing, but what is the Hebrew name for a virus, for a virus? Does anyone know? I'm not going to ask many riddles this year, but it is interesting to note because the Hebrew word for a virus is, let's say I got it chat, a very, very, very good, Mandy. It's a nagif. Nagif is a virus, and it comes from the word magefa. So I'll write it in the chat so everyone will see. And the GIF, I can also write it in the presentation. The GIF is a virus, and the first time we have the word negif is by Pesach, by Mitzrayim. So the first time we have a virus in Tanakh, it appears in Mitzrayim. So there's a lot of, write it in the presentation. There's a lot of comparison, a lot of similarities between what Am Yisrael went through in Mitzrayim and what we're going through right now. So I would like to kind of use what we went through to understand what Am Yisrael went through when they were in Egypt, and I think that will enlighten us a bit about what Pesach is about. Okay, so let's start. Okay. So first of all, it's really interesting that in Mitzrayim, one of the key words that appears again and again and again is the word bayit. If you look in the parshas of Sefer Shmot, Vayera, Bo, the word bayit appears again and again and again and again. And the word bayit, which means a house, literally, if you just translate it literally, is something that we find not just in Mitzrayim, but especially by Pesach. Where do we find it by Pesach? So halachically, by a Korban Pesach, when Am Yisrael ate the Korban Pesach, they had to eat it in their house, labayit. Hashem commands Moshe and Aaron. He tells them, Nisan should be your first month. What should you do? I want you to tell all of Am Yisrael, every person should take a seh, right, a lamb, as a korban pesach labayit. So what does bayit mean? So if you, literally the way of the simple translation would be a house. Make sure that every house has a sheep to sacrifice as a korban pesach. And why is that important? Because we know that they were not allowed to leave the house. So you have to make sure that before Pesach, you have a lamb, you have a say in your house that you'll be able to sacrifice it as a korban Pesach. Okay? So that's the preparation that people had to do. People were not allowed to leave Pesach, were not allowed to leave their house. So they had to make sure before Pesach that they would have a lamb. And this is a very interesting phenomenon. This is a very interesting point because the last Makkah, Makkah's Bechoros, is the only Makkah where Hashem says, I want you to stay in your house. If you compare it to the other Makkahs, Tzfardea, Raidam, Kinim, Arov, we don't find this halacha of, I want you to stay in the house. Only by Pesach, only by Makkah's Bechoros does Hashem tell Am Yisrael, I want you to stay in your house. And it's very peculiar. It's very weird. Why does Hashem want us to stay in our house specifically by Makkah's Bechoros? Does anyone have a good answer? Why to stay in our house in Makkah's Bechoros? Why in Makkah's Tzfardea we didn't have to stay in the house? So, I'll share with you one answer. One answer appears in the Midrash, and the Midrash says something that when there's a negif, when there's a virus going around, or a malach hamavis going around, he doesn't distinguish between a tzaddik and a rasha. So in the case of Makkah's Bechoros, when you have a negif, right, a virus or a malach going around and killing people, he doesn't distinguish between tzaddikim and rishayim. Other makkos were not viruses or malachi hamavis going and killing people. It was frogs. It was blood. It wasn't a virus or a malach going and killing people. And when in a case where it's a virus or a malach killing people, then everyone needs to be in their house because he doesn't distinguish between tzaddikim and rishayim. And we know throughout the pandemic that unfortunately a lot of tzaddikim passed away. Because when there's a pandemic going around, the Malach HaMavis, the virus, doesn't distinguish between tzaddikim and rishayim. So that's one explanation brought down for why Am Yisrael had to stay in their house for the last Makkah. But I want to give a totally different explanation. A totally different outlook, a different view, understanding this whole concept of bias, this whole concept of quarantine. Okay? And personally, I understood this throughout the Corona. What it means to stay in our house. What do we gain by staying in our house? Why Hashem would want us to stay in our house? Why would Hashem would command us to stay in our house? So I'll share with you that when we had to go into quarantine, Shira and I, it was always a debate, where are we going to quarantine? Where and with who are we going to quarantine? Because you don't know, you might be stuck with those people for 2 or 3 or 4 months. So you want to make sure that when you quarantine with the right people. So Baruch Hashem, the first time we quarantined for 3 months is right after Abigail, my daughter, was born. And we quarantined with the right people for 2.5 months, I think, something like that. We spent Pesach with them. It was very meaningful. And we picked right. And you should know that is also part of what the quarantine and Makkah's Bechoros and Pesach was all about. It wasn't just stay in your house to protect yourself from the Malach HaMavis. It was all about staying in your house and making sure you feel part of a small group. And this small group in halacha is called a chabura. And it's very interesting because halachically, when we'll sacrifice Korban Pesach again, the only way you can eat a Korban Pesach is when you find a chabura. You find a group of people you want to join. You are not allowed to sacrifice a Korban Pesach by yourself. It's very different from any other Korban. Other Korbanos, you can sacrifice it by yourself. But a Korban Pesach, it has to be like the Korban Pesach we had in Egypt, where people ate it with other people. You felt part of a group, part of a family unit. Okay? And you can see a picture of what the Korban Pesach would look like. People would sit around the table and eat together Korban Pesach. And that's why, till today, I think that a lot of people feel like Pesach is a time where we get together, all the family, all the relatives, and we eat together because that's what the concept of a chabura is. And it's really cool because halachically, once you pick a chabura, once you pick a place to quarantine, right, you're not allowed to switch from a chabura to a chabura halachically. Once you pick a chabura for Pesach, a group for Pesach, you're not allowed to switch. You're stuck with them. That's the halacha. The same happens with quarantine, right? Once you're quarantined with a group of people, you're not allowed to move to a different group. So this is a very interesting halacha brought down in the Rambam regarding the Korban Pesach. And basically here we find a different translation, a different explanation of what a bayis is. A bayis in Tanakh doesn't only mean a house. A bayis in Tanakh can also mean a family. So when Hashem says, I want you to be with your bayis, he's basically saying, I want you to be with your family. Not just in your home, but to be part of a unit, part of a group, part of a family. Don't be alone on Pesach. And it's interesting because the word bayis appears not just by a Korban Pesach, it also appears by chametz. We say, lo yimatzeh bevateichem. You can't have chametz in your house. You have to take it out. So you find the concept of bayis also by chametz. And if you look at the eating of the Pesach, we see that it has to be done with other people, like we just said. If you look at the Psukim, Shmos Perek Yud Bet, it says, "V'lakchu min hadam." They take from the blood and they put it on the mezuzah. They eat the Korban Pesach together, meaning it's not just a person should eat it individually. You have to eat it with a group of people. So that is explaining how the bayis by Makas Bechoros is for us to eat as a family. And I think that's part of what happened to a lot of people when they were quarantined. They got closer with their family. You don't have to go to work every day. You can sit and talk with your wife and spend more time with your children. Unfortunately, I didn't have as much time to do that because I had to go into the hospital. We weren't exempt from quarantine. We weren't exempt from work. But so that's one thing I wanted to share with it, which I think is very relevant and is much easier to understand, this concept of bayis as a family, especially through everything we've been through. Okay, and now I want to speak about another thing. Okay, what does it mean when I separate myself? And this is related to what Am Yisrael had to do. Am Yisrael, they had to not just stay in their houses, they had to mark their houses. They had to mark their houses with the blood, right? They had to take from the blood and put it on the mezuzot. They had to mark their house. And this is a very weird question. Why would Am Yisrael need to mark their houses? Yesterday I gave a shiur to a few converts, and one of the converts asked me, what, Hashem doesn't, he can do everything, what, he doesn't know how to distinguish between a Jewish house and a non-Jewish house? Right, so why would we need to mark our house? Why would we need to mark our house? So Hashem says you have to mark your house. Don't leave your house because there's going to be a negif, avar Hashem den gofet Mitzrayim, and you have to make sure that the mashchis, the malach who comes to kill the bechoros, will not go into your house. Then it says, Hashem says, I want you to take this concept of marking your house and keep it something that will last forever. So Baruch Hashem today, as far as I know, most people don't put blood on their mezuzah to mark their house as a Jewish house. But what do? We have the actual mezuzah, and this concept of the mezuzah comes from the mezuzah we have by Yetzias Mitzrayim. And basically what we're doing here is we're showing we are a Jewish home. Hashem theoretically can distinguish, but Hashem also wants us to mark ourselves, to identify ourselves as people who believe in Hashem. And that is why we put a mezuzah. And when we stay together in our houses, we basically mark ourselves and we say, we are a family who do not have corona, right? We are a family who believe in Hashem. The way we define ourselves in the eyes of other people, what we believe in and what we express and what we educate. And I'll just share that it's really cool that Hashem told Am Yisrael to use the blood of the Korban Pesach. Why is this interesting? I don't know if many of you know this idea, but the lamb was considered to be a holy animal in Egypt, as you can see here. This is from the ancient Egyptians. They would take the lamb and mummify it because they believed that it was a god. Now it's really cool because the Egyptians believed that the lamb was a god that was in charge of fertility. And that's why they believe that you're not allowed to hurt the lamb. Now, what happened with the Egyptians? Exactly the opposite, right? Instead, they said, we're not going to kill the lamb because it's a holy animal. But the Jews who did kill the lamb, right, none of their Bechoros died. But the Egyptians who did not kill the lamb, all of their Bechoros died. So it's interesting because exactly the opposite thing happened, right? The lamb, which is supposed to represent fertility in the eyes of the Egyptians, did not save their Bechoros. So that's an interesting point, right? And basically, when Jewish people in Egypt were willing to take the holy animal in the eyes of the Egyptian and put it on a mezuzah, they're basically showing and saying, we identify our family as a family who believe in Hashem and don't believe in Avodah Zarah. Okay? So just to summarize the first part, what happened in the first part of Yetzias Mitzrayim? Am Yisrael had to identify themselves as people who believe in Hashem and have to stay together as a group of people. As a unit, we're a unit who believes in Hashem. Okay. Spoke about Makas Bechoros, and now moving to the second part of the Shir. There are going to be three parts to the Shir, I forgot to say initially. Okay. The first part is Korban Pesach. The second part will be the Yetzias Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt. And the third part is a surprise. Okay? So we spoke about what keeps us safe, right? The way we identify ourselves, the fact that we say we believe in Hashem. But how can Am Yisrael leave their houses, right? Now they have to do Yetzias Mitzrayim. So how do you leave your house when you're supposed to be in quarantine, right? When there's a virus around, when there's people are being killed all around you, and there's a virus, and there's a pandemic, how do you leave your house when you need to go to do things, right? When you need to go shopping, what do you do? So how can Am Yisrael leave? What do they do in Yetzias Mitzrayim? What do they do in Yetzias Mitzrayim? How do they leave Egypt when so many people are being killed? How can Hashem make sure that Am Yisrael stay protected when they're leaving Egypt? So again, I'm going to use the mashal of quarantine, okay? So every time a person leaves their house during the pandemic, right, you have to make sure you have a mask on. You have to make sure sometimes if you're really careful, you want to have gloves on. And basically, I'll share one last thing, okay? Right, you have to make sure, a lot of people, during, at least in the beginning of the pandemic, people were very careful not to talk with other people for more than 15 minutes. Because in Israel, if you were next to someone who had corona for more than 15 minutes, you had to go into quarantine automatically. So going back to Pesach, what does Hashem tell Am Yisrael? I want you to leave Mitzrayim quickly, as fast as you can. Now, why would Hashem want Am Yisrael to leave Mitzrayim so quickly? What, Hashem can't do it slowly? And I think part of the concept of Yetzias Mitzrayim is that Hashem didn't want us to mix with the Egyptians. Right now, Am Yisrael completely separated themselves from the Egyptians. We're stuck in our houses, doing the Korban Pesach, and Hashem says, okay, great. I just separated you from the Egyptians. Now make sure you leave as fast as possible without interacting with the Egyptians. Now, how many minutes did it take Am Yisrael to leave Mitzrayim? Exactly, 18 minutes, right? You don't want to have more than 15 minutes with the virus. So you leave as fast as you can. You leave b'chipazon. And when Am Yisrael is leaving Mitzrayim, okay, one second. When Am Yisrael is leaving Mitzrayim, there's Amud Ha'esh. There's the fire of Hashem separating them from the Egyptians. It's like the gloves, it's like the mask separating us from the Egyptians, making sure that we're not going to mix. Okay. So I think that is basically what is happening in Yetzias Mitzrayim. In Yetzias Mitzrayim, Hashem is quickly evacuating Am Yisrael from Mitzrayim, making sure that we're not going to come in contact with the Egyptians. We're leaving as fast as possible. We don't want to come close. We just separate ourselves from you. Don't come close to us. And unfortunately, the Jews who did not mark their houses as being a Jewish house, and the Jews who did not leave quickly Egypt, they were killed, and they stayed in Egypt. Okay, that's what the Midrash says. Okay, now I want to mention one last thing. I'm sure, I don't know if all of you know, but one of the reasons we drink 4 kosos is because when Hashem tells Moshe and Am Yisrael that he's going to take them out of Egypt, he uses 4 different verbs. First verb is hotzeti. The second is hitzalti. Hotzeti is I'll take you out. Hitzalti is I'll save you. Galti is I'll redeem you. And then there's a last verb called velakachti. Now all the first verbs appear in one pasuk together in pasuk vav. The fourth verb appears in pasuk zayin. And I think there's a reason for this distinction. Because I think that there's two things happening here. The first three verbs, hotzeti, hitzalti, and ga'alti, are all things that have to do with Hashem separating Am Yisrael, taking them away from the Egyptians. That's what's going on here. Hotzeti, hitzalti, ga'alti, I am making sure that you're not going to be part of the Egyptians, that the Egyptians will not have anything to do with you for the rest of your lives. I am separating you from them. Okay? That separation is important, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And I think this is where, one second. I think this is exactly where the fourth verb comes into play. Okay? And the fourth verb is a very interesting verb. Okay? If you look over here at the verb, it's velakachti. I'll take you. Does anyone know where else in Tanakh do we have this verb lakachti? Guys, I already kind of showed the slide, but Mandy, do you know where else do you have the word velakachti?
I think with Mordechai and Esther.
Well,
Lakachat lo lavat.
Yeah, but I was referring to something before that in the Torah.
Oh, sorry.
But that is true. It's the same concept. Every time in Tanakh you have the word velakachti, it's referring not to the Hebrew, not to the modern velakachti. It means something totally different.
You have kicha on stay Ephron.
So you have kicha on stay Ephron, which is ownership. Great, I'll take you for me as a nation. But what does the word lakicha mean? What does Hashem mean when he says, I'll take you to be my nation? Okay.
You're alluding to marriage?
I am alluding to marriage. I'm alluding to marriage. This is my favorite word that I'd like to say every Pesach. Shira makes fun of me that I say it every Pesach, but I think it's true.
Shira, don't make fun of him.
So the word velakachti is referring to the last stage, or close to the last stage, of Hashem, of Am Yisrael, not just being separated from the Egyptians, but to be constantly connected to Hashem. This is two separate things. The first thing, the first three verbs is Am Yisrael separating themselves from the Egyptians. The last verb, the fourth verb, which is the fourth kos, which is considered the most special kos on Pesach, besides Kosor Shel Eliyahu, is referring to the fact that Hashem will marry us, right? And that's what the first pasuk in Devarim says: Ki yikach ish isha, when a person marries an isha. Okay? Ki yikach ish isha, when you marry, when a man decides to marry a woman, and that's what the pasuk means as well. Michael, when you said, I'll take you to be my nation. I'll marry you. Okay? So that is what Hashem wants to do. That is what Hashem wants to do. That's his goal. His goal is not just to separate Am Yisrael from the Egyptians, not just to redeem us. The goal is to be married to Hashem. Now, on which holiday do we marry Hashem?
Is it Yom Kippur?
That would be a good guess, but no.
Yom Kippur.
Shavuot.
So my answer is Shavuot.
Okay.
Why?
I was thinking about the last mission in Tanit. That's all.
Yeah, there's a mission in Tanit, I know. But I want to give a different view. Halachically, how is a man mekadesh an isha? So what you have to do is you have to give something over, right? If I want to be mekadesh Michael, right? So I have to give him a coin. Interesting if you can do it through Zoom, I don't know. But you have to give someone something, right? The husband has to give the wife, has to give the isha something, which is a bit more valuable than a prusa. And the wife has to agree. Now what happens on Shavuos? Hashem gives us the Torah. And how much is the Torah worth? We know Alfei Zahav Kesef, right? It's much more than a Prusa. Hashem gives us the Torah, and what does Am Yisrael say? Nasa v'nishma. Am Yisrael agrees. And that's where we become married to Hashem. And we know that the action of being married is called Kiddushin. And from Ma'amad Har Sinai, that's when we consider an Am Kadosh LaHashem Elokecha. Am Kadosh LaHashem Elokecha means that we're married to Hashem, like Kiddushin. So the goal of Yetzias Mitzrayim is not to leave Egypt. The goal of Yetzias Mitzrayim is to be married to Hashem. That is the goal. And once we spoke about that, let's get back into quarantine. How do you go back into normal? How do you continue your life normally? So you can't always, right, theoretically continue, right, another 100 years with a mask on. You can't just always live separately. You need to have something protecting you constantly that's within you. Right, protecting you from all this avodah zarah, protecting you from the Egyptians, protecting you from the virus. And Baruch Hashem in Eretz Yisrael, and I understand that in UK as well. Right, we have a virus, we have a vaccine. And what is the best vaccine that Hashem gave us to protect us from anything in the future which will want to destroy us, or anything in the future which will want to affect us? It can be avodah zarah, it can be makas becharos. What do we have that Hashem gave us? The answer is the Torah. The two luchos. The Gemara says that the two luchos are the best cure, the best sum that Am Yisrael has ever had. And that's the vaccine that we have. And that's how we emerge from Mitzrayim. We emerge from the pandemic. We emerge from the nugget of Makas Becharos. And it's really cool that today, right, I'm a Bechor. So theoretically, I need to fast on Erev Pesach. Bechoros need to fast. Do we have any more Bechoros here? Great. What do Am Yisrael do to escape Tanis Bechoros? How do we escape Tanis Bechoros? We use the same vaccine that Hashem gave us. Right? We learn a Masechet, we learn some Torah, and then we don't have to fast Makas Bechoros because we're not in danger anymore because we have the Torah. I know that's not simple pshat. I know that we also, right, we don't fast because we finish a siyum, but I think part of it is we do it, right? We don't do it for any other fast, that we do a siyum so we won't fast. Specifically on Makas Bechoros, the Torah will protect us. The Torah will protect us from the danger of Makas Bechoros, from the nagif. Okay? I hope I was clear until now. I assume if no one's asking a question, then everything is very clear, or you're very polite, or you didn't understand anything. But all the options are okay. I don't mind. Okay? Let's say that. So I think, to summarize, that is, I'll share one last point that I skipped. To summarize, when we speak about the emerging from lockdown, right, we spoke about how the lockdown is to make sure that we separate ourselves and we unite as a family. We clarify what we believe in and how we're different from other people. Then we leave Mitzrayim quickly. We leave and we separate ourselves from the things that can affect us badly. And the things that can constantly protect us is when we're close to Hashem. When we're close to the one who loves us and believes us through the Torah and through living a life of avodas Hashem. Just one last point, which I skipped, is this picture over here. Yeshayahu says that the goal of Mitzrayim, the reason why Hashem put us in Mitzrayim in the first place, is the same thing that happens to gold. When you want to create gold, you want to create something special. The only way to create it is when you put in a burning furnace, right? And you boil it on a terrible high temperature. And then what happens is you get the gold. And all the rest of the thing, all the other terrible metals separate from the gold. That's what's happening in Mitzrayim. When Hashem puts us in Mitzrayim, the people who truly believe in Hashem and will continue to eternally to believe in Hashem are going to be those who are willing to leave Mitzrayim, those who are willing to separate themselves, those who are willing to see the Torah. What?
Korah Barzel.
It's Korah Barzel. So yeah, that's what Yeshayahu says. He says also that's the same reason for Galus. That those who are able to survive Galus, to survive London, to survive America, to survive Europe, those are going to be the people who are going to be willing and be able to come back there to show and build the Mikdash again. Okay, so that was a short shir on preparing us for Pesach, using the mashal of Corona.
Thank you very much indeed, Rabbi Taragin.
Thank you.
A pleasure, a pleasure.
Many thanks.
All well, all busy at home?
Yeah, Baruch Hashem, everyone's asleep. That's a good sign. Okay.
Right.
Thank you for this course of teaching, and
thank you for the
Baruch Hashem, I'll see everyone in Yerushalayim this year or next year.
Everyone's teaching it now.
I don't know if you're aware, but there's a Para Aduma, which is 2.5 years old in Eretz Yisrael. So in Elul, this coming Elul, it's supposed to be 3. Once the Para Aduma turns 3, we can build Beis HaMikdash. So you have there's a lot of cool expectations going on in Eretz Yisrael.
So have you've been sharpening your knives and you're ready for the Shechita?
Yeah, I've been practicing Shechita. Last week I did Shechita with a group of students. I didn't tell Shira, but
Thank you.
Okay, call to everyone.
Kol tov, thanks very much indeed. Tomorrow evening, I am in discussion with Zach Polanski, who is the Green candidate. Who's the Green candidate for Mayor of London. On Monday evening, I'll be in conversation with Louisa Porritt, who is the Lib Dem candidate for Mayor of London. If any of you want to stand for Mayor of London, I'm happy to chat with you now. Otherwise, I wish you all a good evening and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.